and Deepavali. So today we will start a new episode of our series of talks centered around software engineering. But as we have noted, we have been discussing from a much broader canvas. With the basic objective is to make you aware, first of all, the requirements of the industry, environment of the industry, and so that the very well known gap between,
Sir, one question can we ask?
yes,
So, is there any information for to start the university,
start the university, that I cannot say.
like offline exam?
That you have to talk to the HOD, yeah?
Okay, sir. Okay.
That you talk to the HOD, yeah? And the series of talks we are having in this course is basically uh, meant for, okay, to make you more suitable for industry and try to bridge the gap between academia and the industry. And of course, we have taken software engineering as the broad subject. Okay, so you have to attend this course from that perspective. Um, of course, marks matters, but what matters more is to get professional satisfaction, and for that you need to have a good job. And this is where we are trying to address. This is the issue we are trying to address. Okay, the kind of today's I've given the title as software evolution. Um, I'll start with a small anecdote. When I was a student of Calcutta University in early 1980s, yes, we saw our first personal computer. Before that, we used to use one computer. Uh, in that time in Calcutta, there were hardly 3 or 4 computers, and uska main memory tha around 16K, 16 kilobytes. Can you imagine? The first PC, which we call desktop today, arrived in Science College, Rajabhaja campus of Calcutta University, if I remember correctly, around 1982. And cost of that PC was rupees 1,25,000 with a memory of 128 kilobytes. 128 kilobytes. Of course, you are not born then, but 82, that means in 40 years. It's unbelievable the rate of progress of computer industry. Rate of progress of computer industry is unbelievable. And what is even more unbelievable is the way this computer industry has percolated to every other sector of the industry and social life. That is even more amazing, even more amusing. We talk of technology revolution. Of course, we are in an era of technology revolution, but this is completely centered around the revolution in computer technology. Just like, and obviously, this could happen because of the tremendous advancements of physics, chemistry, and maths in the last century. Basic sciences, advancements of basic sciences is just unbelievable. Can you see? It was unbelievable even 10 years back. the kind of memory we have, kind of processing speed we have, and all those. So generally, computer has two parts, hardware and software. Now see the advancements in hardware industry. See the advancement in hardware industry. Today, memory space is hardly any bottleneck. Computer speed is hardly any, processing speed is hardly any bottleneck. And which is even more interesting to note that it has gone ahead in terms of user friendliness, way ahead of many other established engineering sectors, say automobile sector. Today, we can buy different parts of a computer. Even a school kid, a college kid, can buy different parts of a computer and then build his or her own computer. Can you imagine buying different parts of a vehicle and make your own vehicle? Not possible. So, hardware industry, thanks to the again huge investment, huge the changes in uh, physics, chemistry, and maths, has been improving in leaps and bounds. But and accordingly, now that we have almost boundless capabilities of hardware, various kinds of applications are coming to our mind, to the business environment, to the business society. The kind of environment, the kind of applications which we are seeing today was unbelievable even to imagine about 3 to 4 decades back. Now, to develop that applications, now today we have gone to a level, say, you think of a car, electric cars are coming. Electric car is nothing but computers. You can call them IoT driven. Think of washing machines. Think of everything is computer driven. But unfortunately, the software is not able to keep pace with the speed at which the hardware is improving. Again, software is not being able to keep pace. Advancement in software is not able to keep pace with hardware. One simple example: in software engineering regular class, you must have studied software architecture. I think I had also referred to this term in some of my previous talks. Just like hardware architecture, we do also have software architecture, where we can have different modules, and finally we develop the software by interconnecting those modules. In fact, Java, Python, all these are like that only. You have several modules, and then um, just interconnect those. But unfortunately, what we said today about hardware, that we buy different parts, interconnect them, and the and get the computer. But can we interconnect the software modules? Can we interconnect the software modules? The answer is emphatic no. To some extent, yes. To some extent, yes. But not to the extent we would have loved to have. So, in a nutshell, what we say is a very famous premise or postulate in economics says that to achieve economic prosperity, listen to me very carefully, to achieve economic prosperity, your expenses should always exceed your income, irrespective of your income. Again, to achieve economic sustainable, I should say, to achieve sustainable economic prosperity, your expenses should always exceed your income, irrespective of your income, because that gives you the impetus to work harder, to uh, explore new fields. Same thing applies to the computer industry. The more we need hardware, hardware is coming up with a better solution. And again, the software applications are getting more and more sophisticated. So this is the background. So, so, so let's now try to concentrate on software development process, how it has evolved over the last several decades. First thing is, what are the goals of, and we are using the word production. Software, since we believe that software can also be engineered, just like any other engineering production, we consider software is also produced. So to make production, obviously, it has to be reliable, predictable, and efficient. Reliable, predictable, and efficient. I'm not getting into the detailing of these terms. You can, from clear analytical perspective, but we can understand what it means as a naive person. So it has to be reliable, predictable, efficient. Just some examples. Reliable. Yes, in the last class, I think I was referring to some kind of defensive programming or redundant programming. What are those? Very often we see we are working on a software and suddenly something happens and you are taken out of the software. To avoid that, we use defensive programming, we use error trapping routines. Error trapping routines. So, to enhance the reliability, and nothing should be unpredictable. Nothing should be unpredictable. And efficient means the efficient usage of memory and this the processors, memory and processor. Because nowadays any application, if it's successful, increases almost at an exponential rate. Think of the software which runs companies like Zomato, Swiggy, Ola, Uber in the background. Think the size of that company just 5 years back, and where are they now? Naturally, the software has to be capable enough to adapt itself to the increasing case load. Increasing case load. So it has to be efficient. Now, reliability, predictability, and efficiency, out of that reliability and predictability, this is feasible only if you have automation in the production process. You have automation in the process of production. Today, all the vehicles are in production is automated. So unless, and that is the difference between a manually produced product vis-a-vis a product produced through automation. Automation generally guarantees reliability and predictability. Uh, if you use any man-made product, the quality, reliability, all these will depend on the person who is developing the product. On the other hand, if it is automation, this is person independent. This is person independent. As a parallel example, I can give you, I can share one anecdote once again. Suppose you want to go to some place from Howrah to Kalna, Katwa, or whatever. There are two. One is there are 5 trains. There are 5 trains per day, but you do not know the timing. And the second situation is there are 2 trains, but the timings are well defined. Which one you would prefer? Obviously, the second one, because it is predictable. Because it is predictable. Today, when you drive a car, you need fuel. Now, with the fuel meter, you know how many more miles you can go without refilling. This is predictability. Next is standard components can be used. This is another important aspect because this production process is evolving. This production process is evolving. Think of the example, you use electric bulbs. We had those conventional bulbs. Then we had what? LEDs. So many different kinds of technology-driven bulbs. Wattage has come down drastically. But have you noted that the holder remains the same? Bulb holder remains the same. That means you have to identify some components which have to be perfectly standardized. And you cannot deviate from that standardization process. Otherwise, your product will not find any taker in the market. So that say tomorrow some new technology comes up. But already there are huge number of applications available in the market. So unless these applications can be ported into the new technology, that cannot be accepted by the industries in the society. And the typical example is centered around quantum computing. Quantum computing is a fascinating area. Huge amount of research is going on. And they are all set to come up with machines based on quantum computing. But the major challenge lies in that compatibility. Whatever applications are running now in conventional computing, there has to be some means by which these applications can be made adaptable in a machine based on quantum computing. So standard components have to be used. When you make a printer, say HP some printer, you have to ensure that these can be used with the computer of any make. It can be used with a mobile, laptop, and everything. And similarly, when you produce a laptop, I have to use it with a printer. So there has to be absolutely standardized documents, internationally acceptable by all stakeholders uh, in the process of production. And naturally, this is possible only if automation is done. And standard processes can be used. This is another important issue. As it is generally said that you can have some fancy processes, fancy statements while you develop a code. Make sure that in the process of making your the code more fancy, the readability of the code should not deteriorate. A common example is found in the field of soccer. Some players, they are so much involved, get overboard in showing up to the gallery about their dribbling power, etc., and finally they become useless. Of course, if you are a Maradona, then it's a different ball game altogether. Different ball game altogether. You can deviate from standard process, like in cricket field. Virendra Sehwag started with that uppercut. Nobody even thought of that. Nobody even thought of that earlier. But Sehwag is Sehwag. So he tried something different from standard, and then he made that a standard process. But for lesser mortals in the beginning of their career, it is not advisable to be too adventurous. Too adventurous. But of course, if you are too confident, then it's fine. Same thing happened with, if I remember correctly, it's Sanat Jayasuriya of Sri Lanka, or Kaluvitrana of Sri Lanka, who had experimented with reverse sweep. In those days, it was not at all standard. Now it has become a standard process. Now it has become a standard process. So similarly, when you write a code, depending on the language you use, it may have some features, some special purpose, facilities. There's nothing wrong in using those facilities, but make sure that the readability of the code, which is very much required for maintainability of the code, that should not be hampered. Okay. Now let us get down to the software development process models. So the earliest model, if we call it a model at all, is known as code and fix model. Code and fix model. It has been in use for probably 50 years, 60 years, or whatever. If at all we call it a model. Same as what you use while you writing a code in your classroom. What you do, having given a problem, you write the algorithm and then develop the code. And while developing the code, you just keep on updating the code as per your choice. So what is the result? Of course, you may come up with a code which runs, gives the result, show it to your teacher and get a fantastic grade. But even after 3-4 months, you yourself will not be able to decipher what you had written. You yourself will not be able to decipher what you have written. In a typical software industry, mainly in the beginning of the careers, the students keep on changing jobs very frequently. Can you imagine if in a company somebody was writing a code for 3 months, she leaves the job, and some other person comes and she cannot understand whatever her predecessor had written, what will happen to the company? So, ideally, any software has different kinds of stakeholders. Like, who are the developers? First of all, who are the developers? Who are the users? And who are the owner? So, owner, developer, user. These three are most important stakeholders of any software product. Now, when you write a code for your classroom or for your even say BTech or MTech project, essentially you are the owner, you are the developer, and you are the user. Then there is no problem. It's something like when you cook some food in your home and you know that you only will eat that food, you are not bothered whether the food is good or bad. It will always look good to you. But once you know that the food has to be sold at a cheaper price for different kinds of people, then it becomes an entirely different ballgame. Entirely different ballgame. Think of a typical software development activity, railway reservation system. I can explain because I was involved in the project in the initial stages, early 80s. Who was the owner? Of course, Indian Railways. Who are the developers? CMC Limited. Who are the users? Aam Janta. And even railway officers are also users because they have to use it for various decision makings. So, user, developer, owner, they are of three different classes. Then, obviously, this age-old code and fix model is absolutely unworkable. Absolutely unworkable. So, code and fix model can be used, even that is also not advisable if it is a single person task. No distinction between programmer and user. Problems are mathematical and well understood. If you want to write a code, for inversion of a matrix, very clearly defined mathematical problem. This is one issue. Other issue is you have to write a code for, say, somebody has given an order to move 3 items in Zomato. Think of the complexity. The 3 items may have to be purchased from 3 different places. N number of the delivery persons are available, and there could be many optimal solutions. I should say satisfiable solution. When you think of a matrix inversion, the target solution is well defined. Whereas in the example I have given, target solution is something you have to come up which is workable in optimal time and optimal cost. So, in such complex problems, it is impossible to even imagine to think about code and fix model. So, what is code and fix model? It is a two-step process. You write the code. Whenever there is an error, keep on changing to enhance existing functionality or to add new features. So the development process is neither precisely formulated nor carefully controlled. Code structure becomes too messy after a sequence of changes. Obviously, if you keep on changing the code, after some time, it becomes very messy, and naturally, the reliability it's true with any gadget. It's true with any product you use. Uh, the more you keep on changing the internals of a product, the less reliable the product becomes. The less reliable the product becomes. Okay. So we need something else as a model for software development. So what is today's environment? Software is not developed for personal use. That is the first thing. You are not writing the software for your own use. This is the mindset as a student you have to develop before you enter an IT industry. In the university, you always develop the software for your own usage. Either it's a project or a term paper or whatever. But when you join a computer industry, you are not developing the project for your personal usage. You are developing the software for a whole lot of stakeholders, each of whom has their own set of requirements and yardsticks. Then the end users, अरे तो रेकॉर्डिंग करता बेटा end users, oh Baba, end users may not have any background of computing. This is very, very important. End users may not have any background of computing, but they may be very sharp with very high IQ. So when you develop a software for the owner of the company, the owner may be interested to see how the development process is going on. She may not have any background of computing, but she may be very bright, very sharp, and you just cannot say that, madam, you don't understand, so let me, don't ask us. It's exactly something like when you build a house. When you build a house at a cost of, say, 30 lakhs, and you deploy some contractor, but you do not have any background of civil engineering or architecture or even mechanical electrical. And once you go to the site and see how the building, how the process is going on, but you don't have any background of all this. So now if the contractor says that, sorry, please don't interfere. Please don't interfere. Let us do our job. You don't have the background. Will it be acceptable to you? because it is your money. It is your problem. So there comes interpersonal skill. There comes interpersonal skill, behavioral science. How do you interact with different kinds of people? You just cannot ignore somebody if she is too big, even if she is too small. So end users may not have any background of computing. Finally, next, software is a product that needs to be marketed, sold, and installed on different machines at different sizes. It's just not for your personal satisfaction. You may be a very good painter. You may be a very good painter. And when you develop a painting to be kept in your own house, no problem. But if your objective is to market, sell that product to different societies, like expectations from Germany will not be same as expectation from China, or expectation from US, or expectation from India. Even within India, expectation from one region may be different from expectation from some other region. So nowadays, software is a product that needs to be marketed, sold, and installed on different machines at different sites. So that makes the entire game entirely different. Entirely different. Finally, software development is a group activity. As another example of the previous one, when I said it has to be marketed, sold, and installed, you may have noted that many film directors use novels of very well-known writers for filmmaking. Even then, they sometimes change the product, of course, without violating the copyright, for making the film, because they feel it is necessary for selling the film. Then software development is a group activity. Gone are the days when you used to sit in a room and write your code. Just like you sit in a room and write a poem or develop a painting. Today, software development is a group activity. And not only a group activity. The group, depending on the size of the software, the group may consist of several subgroups with hugely different geographical locations. Brazil, Argentina, California, Germany, China, India. So the same software is being developed by a group comprising of many subgroups, and they have to be very closely linked, because the outcome of one subgroup may be the input of another subgroup. So, project management is a humongous task. Huge task, project management. And within the group, there would be different kinds of persons, different food habits, different religion, caste, language, culture. But that's how you have to adapt. That's why you will see that generally, except for probably Tata's, all big IT companies are first generation companies. All big software companies, because traditionally traditionally manufacturing companies, their culture is very much different from the culture of a software company. In a soft and again within software company, there would be companies on software product or companies on software services. Some companies, say Oracle, who are mainly product-based companies. Their work culture is entirely different from work culture of a service-oriented companies. So far as I know, in Hillsdale, California, where this Oracle head office is situated, since I was in California for several years, long time back, I've seen the people, young people, and my students are also there in any case. So I knew that their work culture is something like, say, they identify 25 bright uh, software guys and girls, and they are kept within that huge building for 1 month. Pura 24 hours, 24 by 7. Everything is taken care of by the company and very well taken care of. Not taken care of, very well taken care of. With very high profile deadline. And because they already have announced much earlier the release of the next version and they have to meet the deadline. Okay. So, but once the job is done, then they are given, say, 15 days leave, paid leave, vacation, etc., etc. On the other hand, similarly, if you think of Microsoft, generally Microsoft environment is very informal, very informal. Even if you go to Hyderabad, Microsoft Hyderabad campus, you will feel the difference. Microsoft with, say, IBM. IBM is very formal. So, on the other hand, those companies which are service oriented, they have to follow mostly the timeline of their customers. And naturally, that would be 24 by 7. If your customer happens to be in US, your working hours will be during night. So the moment you join a software industry, you have to be prepared for a 24 by 7 job. How many hours a day, how many hours a week, these does not make any sense in software development company. And naturally, you have to be very passionate about it. But at the same time, I would also suggest that this group activity, you have to learn the art of mixing with people. It is quite likely that you may not like somebody, quite likely, but you have to be prepared to work with that person intensively for the purpose of the company, for the purpose of the development. So your personal liking and disliking have to be suppressed depending on the requirement of the company and software development. So to achieve all these requirements, to address all these requirements, and to migrate from the age-old code and fix model to address today's environment. What are the requirements? First thing is there has to be a design phase prior to coding. Just like when you build a house, think of the enormous extent of drawing to the absolute micro level. Japanese are very well cherished for the detailing of design phase in any engineering product design. Just you get a problem and start solving it or implementing it is not done in today's phase. You have to have a clearly identified design phase. Clearly identified design phase, and where you have to think all the pros and cons, what are the alternatives, which would be best suited, and remember, the customer wants the job done on time, at minimum cost, and satisfying the specifications. Students have a tendency, many, I'm not saying all, many students have a tendency to get overwhelmed by the technology. But remember, you have to solve the problem. Technology is only a supportive function. Of course, you need to understand the technology. Almost 80% of the cases I've seen, if I ask a student, what is the subject you like? The answer would be Java, Python, and all those. But Baba, these are not subjects. These are languages. And the customer is hardly bothered whether it's Java or Python. They want to get their job done on time at minimum cost and satisfying the specifications. Of course, you need to learn Java and Python to the maximum extent. Of course. But at the same time, you must also understand that when somebody is asking your favorite subject, it has to be data structures, algorithms, graph theory, operating systems, database management systems. And another thing is getting overwhelmed by the using jargons. Many people feel it seems satisfaction by if you ask somebody, if either he will answer Java, Python, or he will answer AI, ML, deep learning, and all those. But once again, these are required, but you must learn data structures and algorithms. So when somebody asks you what is your favorite subject, think of 2-3 basic subjects. Operating system, fine. Computer networks, fine. Architecture, fine. Software engineering, fine. But these are required for design phases. Even so, this is one requirement. The need for a design phase prior to coding. Then detailed and careful analysis of the requirements necessary before design and coding. In fact, the requirements should come earlier than the design phase. What are the requirements? If you ask somebody, if you want to build a house or a car, first thing the builder will ask you, how many stories? What is the square feet? What are the scope for expansion? How many space for gardening you require? Similarly, when you develop a software, you ask to develop a software, then you need to know very well that, okay, how many customer users are today? This customer says 100, fine. Then you ask to what extent it can go. 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, like that. So if they say 10,000 in 3 years, you have to keep a provision for that. Not necessarily right now, and they will give you a roadmap. Is 3,000 over. But if the user number comes to 10,000 and your software becomes pathetically slow, that's not your problem. That's not your problem, because that was a problem in requirements specification. When you arrange for the say a reception, contract a caterer. The first thing caterer will ask, how many heads you have? You say 500. They will keep additional 10 or 20% provision for that. But if the number of heads turns out to be 1,000 plus, and some people do not get food, it's not the problem of the caterer. It's not the problem of the caterer. It's your problem in requirement specification. So similarly, nowadays you will see the work turnkey project kind of thing. In many cases, gone are the days, in the initial days, we used to have hardware engineers, software engineers. Then we used to have, like marketing, finance, etc. Nowadays, turnkey computer specialists are also very important. Many companies are working on that. Turnkey means a big company will give you the problem specification, and you have to have clear understanding in developing both the hardware specifications as well as software specifications. पूरा मिला के इंटीग्रेट करके this customer को देना होगा. So their requirement is very important. You can keep say 5%, 10% tolerance. Okay. Then throw away prototypes and evolutionary prototypes. This I will explain in the next class in details. The apparent ease of change that characterizes software. Yes, this is again and again and repeating. The inherent propensity or tendency we have at the student life to change the code whenever I feel like, that has to be changed. We cannot change the code just like this. And if I remember correctly, what I discussed in the last class when I was explaining the importance of self-discipline, like structured programming, documentation, both implicit and explicit, all these have to be very, very clearly identified. This will work later on. So today we have formed the necessary background for developing our study on software development process. Very clearly known term is SDLC, Software Development Life Cycle, which we will discuss in the next class. You may be asked questions about SDLC in many interviews, but today we have tried to develop the background, to develop the mindset as you prepare for your transition from a student life to a professional life. I think we should stop here today. It's 12:30. Any questions? because next class we'll start with waterfall model. I will not start the model today. So any question? Gitanjali? Gitanjali?
Yes, sir.
Are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, very much. So were you in the during the talk, listening to my talk as well?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I think we should stop here today. It's in any case 12:30 plus. So because next we'll start, we'll discuss other standard models. That we'll do next in the next class, and that would be very very important. And I'm sure the students have already learned this in their regular classes, but it would help them if they refresh their memory during these classes. So, any questions? There is no question, it seems. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So, done for today.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
So, next class, next Tuesday, same time.
Huh. Okay, sir.
And since we'll discuss software process development models, that would be very, very, very important for the students to attend. Huh?
তার থেকে বলবে আমরা হেল্প করতে পারবো নতুন মেশিনে যে পাওয়ার অন করে চেক করো
Okay. So, you can,
চেক করো ফাস্ট করে যেখানে ল্যাব আছে ওটা চেক করো
so you can close the session.
Okay, sir. With your permission, then, sir, I'm ending the.
Sure, ending the session. You end the
I'm
session.
ending. Thank you, sir.
চেক করো পরে লাস্ট মিনিটে আমরা